Hi everybody, Chris here from Truly Holistic. Now this video is going to be about solstice. Today here in New Zealand it is winter solstice, right? It is June the 21st today. And of course in the Northern Hemisphere they are in the midst of summer, so summer solstice. Now solstice, the word solstice and the meaning of solstice is something it hasn't really come into session work. It hasn't really wanted me to dig deeper into the aspect of solstice. Of course, if anybody that's followed Truly Holistic and obviously all my social media platforms knows I connect the aspect of the word soul, right? SOL, which is the sun, in connection to SOUL, the soul. That is our unique energy signature, our consciousness. Now, I always quite often say with my clients that the human that is guided through discernment of the mind and its thoughts, and the mind is always externalizing our perspective of reality. So we will embody the identity we were given us as the human and what the world required us to be. But that quite often leads to a lifetime of confusion and of inner conflict because something just doesn't seem right. Doesn't feel right is probably the best way to say that. And that's because we're quite often embodying an identity, a way of doing that doesn't sit right with what we authentically are. And we are authentically the soul, right? That's our authenticity. We came here first as the soul, and we became the human second. And the main curriculum aspect of becoming the human was when the mind intervened, right? And it's really holistic. We see that the soul is facilitated through the heart, and that another intelligence is facilitated through the mind, which, let's just say, is more associated with artificial intelligence. Now, so quite often with my clients, I'll go, okay, through that mind externalized perspective, right? That as the human, often ask the question, hey, what's the greatest energy source, light source that we experience? And of course, that's the sun, soul, right? SOL. Now, if I go to them, well, let's internalize that perspective, right? In a more conscious and spiritual way. What is your greatest light source and energy source? And of course, we're referencing that as the soul. So we kind of get to the same conclusion. So then the question is, well, what is the projector and what is the projection? Right? It's because in a lot of consciousness work is this aspect that we need to go within, right? We need to resolve the conflict within because we know that if we're conflicted within, then we project that out into our reality. Well, if that's the case, well, is the sun, SOL, a projection of our consciousness, SOUL? Right? After all, each one of us will only look through a pair of eyes. And that's our own. And then what's unique from individual to individual is their perspective of reality, right? So, and that's always going to be guided either from what comes through the mind or what comes through the heart. That's your choice in the end. Now, one thing about when I looked at solstice was, because I'm big on symbology, I'm big on understanding where the word comes from to begin with. So, ancient language, Latin, breaks the word solstice down into, obviously, we've already discussed the first component, right? SOL, soul, is sun, right? And the stis, right, the STICE comes from sistere, which is SISTERE, which means to stand still. Now, I find this really interesting because when we look at a practice such as meditation, right, which is really the practice to go within, right? To go within, to connect more into our consciousness, right? So, and quite often, that will be to find that stillness, right? That silence, silencing the mind chatter, right? The mind and its thoughts, right? To bypass the mind and fall into our heart, which is the facilitation of our soul, S-O-U-L, right? So solstice is essentially meaning this aspect of our connection to the sun, but more importantly, connection to the soul. And how do we connect into our soul better? When I mean soul, S-O-U-L. We present a state of being, right? This is why we're called human beings. And a state of being is achieved when we achieve a meditative state, which is to bypass the mind, fall into a heart, which allows the heart to open. And what does it facilitate? Our authenticity is the soul, S-O-U-L. Isn't that interesting, right? Because when we look at solstice, really, in the idea that, this aspect of when we are closest to the sun or furthest away from the sun, then it's really a mind externalized perspective of what's going on, which might not really be its true authentic meaning of what it deeply represents. Okay, and I always say to my clients, right, that there's an expression to get to the origin or the core of anything, and it's to get to the heart of the matter. Now, it uses the word heart, right? Because where is our origin? How is it facilitated? Through the heart, right? As I say, we came here as the soul first, became the human second. How did we get here to begin with? Through the heart. When the embryo forms the heart, that's when ourselves, our authenticity as the soul came through the heart to have an experience here. Before we were birthed as the human. Okay? And actually, we weren't even the human then. It was when the mind intervened that we became the human. So isn't this interesting, right? This whole aspect of solstice is really, it's not about what we're perceiving outside of us or externalizing that perspective. It's actually got a greater understanding, a greater meaning to it, which I think presents a lot greater insight into it in this way. Now, one thing I also want to mention about is this aspect of, as I mentioned, right, the mind will always externalize our perspective of reality. And also the mind is very bound and tied to time, right? This is why many feel like, okay, we're going to wait for the solstice because this is an opportunity to download new codes or new downloads in regards to my involvement as a consciousness, spirituality. Or I'm going to wait for the 888 portal or the 666 portal or so on, which is waiting, which is waiting for certain times of the year for opportunities to grow and evolve. Well, isn't that really us allowing time to influence us? And really, what I've come to find is time is not a fabric of reality. The mind will tell you that, but it's not true. Time was a human creation, right? And when we're talking about solstice, right, to connect into our soul through standing still, right, presenting a state of being, that stillness to connect, fall into the heart and connect with ourselves as the soul in relevance to our projection and connection of that soul, the S-O-L, the sun, right, is the now. It's the moment which removes us from time, right? The present moment, right? The saying, all we have is now, which is really removing ourselves from time. Okay. Humans created time, right? The measurement of time, such as an hourglass, such as a clock. And what has it really done? It's made us a slave to time. It removes ourselves from the now, which means it removes ourselves from facilitating our natural state, which is a state of being. Okay? This is what the mind's done to us in the way it wants us to view and perceive reality, which includes bringing time into the situation, which is just another limiting factor, a confinement, a controlling aspect. And I'm here to say we don't need to wait for these, what they call celestial events or cosmic events. We have a portal that can facilitate everything that you are and everything you need in each and every moment. It's there, and it's called the heart. Okay, and when you realize that and you know that you can facilitate that in each and every moment of your existence, you don't have to wait for anything. You don't have to be dependent on anything, which means you don't form attachments to anything. That's free will. That's freedom. That is the definition of that. So I hope you really enjoyed this video, digging deeper into this aspect of solstice, because there's so much more to learn. And I want to share that with you. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more to come. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a like, subscribe to the channel. Till next time, catch you later.